Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading in the One Year Bible. My name is Stephen Mizell, and Jay Rivenbark and I are joined this week by Wendy Korbusieski, and we're going to spend the week in Proverbs. We're in verses 4 through 6 of chapter 20 today, and we're going to talk about three semi-unrelated things. We're going to talk about laziness and disciplines. We're going to talk about asking the right questions of people, and we're going to talk about loyalty. So I hope you grab your Bible and a pen and paper. Let's have a conversation around the Word of God. Hey everyone, it's July 27th. We're in Proverbs this week, Proverbs 20. Today we're going to be in verses 4, 5, and 6. And Proverbs is a lot of them are detached. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 or 4 that are connected together. These are kind of diagnostic observations of human behavior, mm-hmm. That he offers. He talks about kind of 3 failures: procrastination, hidden motives, self-inflation. Did any of these verses maybe trigger a thought that you wanted to make sure we talked about that I don't maybe have a question for?
A general observation that problems typically aren't detected, or when problems are detected, it's normally at harvest time. You realize there's a problem, but that's not where they originate. They originate in a planning problem. So It's evidence of a lack. You rarely create a problem at harvest time. It just reveals what was not done well.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of tie into my observation too, that equally important is not only the work you do, but the timing of the work. Those 2 things together are what ultimately leads to a harvest. Mm-hmm. They're both important.
Verse 4 warns that the lazy person does not plow in season and is left with nothing at harvest. What are some seasonal plowing disciplines in ministry or family life that are easy to neglect, but catastrophic if you miss them?
I kind of made a list here, particular focusing on your family, things like spending time with your spouse. Those are planning moments that you see the results of later. And if neglected, it creates havoc. Teaching your children to pray when they're young.
Right.
That's, a serious seed to plant there early. Waiting too old to start planning for retirement. Mm-hmm. There's never a too young age that qualifies for. Being a good friend. To have good friends means you have to be a good friend. And so planting that seed in advance sets you up to harvest good friendships later. And then ministry-wise, failing to identify and develop leaders as they show up. You're setting your organization up, whether it be ministry or whatever organization you're running. You're not planting those seeds of development early. You're setting yourself up to fail. And then personally, just those small spiritual disciplines, they matter. They feel like those little mustard seeds of discipline, but over time they create a faithfulness that endures.
Can I say you touched on every one that I had on my list? Every one of those family came to mind. If you don't plow, quote, seasonally or all along and maintain those relationships, it creates problems on the backside. I had noted financially as it relates to retirement, because when you get to that season, it's a little late to be thinking, let me break up some fallow ground here and plant some seeds and expect a significant harvest. That's required a lot earlier in the process. Ministry is much the same way. I don't think you get to the ministry plowing effectively if you're not taking care of the personal aspects that you alluded to there. I put in my notes here, not that we have made a mistake in any regards, but I made a note that when we have talked in the past about building buildings, expanding buildings and things, just like at the Bertie campus, we were at that time think we were looking at like $200 a foot for building cost, and now some of the latest numbers, is that something I can say? What the per square foot projections are gone like to 600, and you're like, holy moly cow.
Yes,
and again, I'm not saying we missed it or should have done something earlier, but I do think it points out the fact that the cost you pay later to try to harvest something is much greater than if you had planted seed much earlier in the process. And I think that applies to every aspect of life.
One of the things that I noted, I mean, there's probably not a lot I can add. The two I would probably say would be, if you're a communicator, so on the ministry side, Saturday night sermons are horrendous. Mm-hmm. You've got to have the discipline of regular study, preparation, The other thing I would say is in a corporate environment, and when I say corporate, I don't mean like business, but when you anything that is aggregate people, could be the family, could be church staff, it could be the church, corporate. Ignoring difficult conversations early creates festering wounds that are very difficult to manage later, and they become infected, and it's just it becomes ugly. If you don't nobody likes difficult conversations, right? But if you have it sooner rather than later, if you have it when the thorn gets in your finger rather than when the finger gets infected, it's much better to talk about. Yeah. So verse 5 says, though good advice hides deep in the heart, a person of understanding will draw it out. It compares human motives to deep waters that a person of understanding can draw out. As leaders, how do we cultivate the patience and skill required to look past surface behavior and understand what is driving people?
My initial reaction to that question was I immediately thought about my grandmother, because she had this uncanny ability to, what I would say, read people within like minutes of meeting them. I mean, she could smell a rotten egg way before that thing was ever cracked. She just knew. She had this sense. And what I've come to understand later in life, that's a gift. I mean,
that's right. Discernment is a gift.
Yeah, that was a gift of discernment, and layer that in with life experience, and you have this ability to kind of read people for exactly who they are, not who they say they are, or beyond their actions and their words, but to kind of sniff out motivation. But I've said all that to say some of those skills can be learned. I recently did an online class about effective communication, and part of that was being able to read micro expressions. Like everybody has these micro expressions, the way they tilt their head, the way their eyes move, the shape of their mouth when they're responding or just sitting paused in conversation while listening. So you can learn those things and pick up micro expressions of people to kind of discern, if you will, the underlying things. But what I noticed too in my school teaching days, we had kids that exploded sometimes, or were always angry, or always detached. And from experience, I came to understand that those things, the outward actions, were really undercurrents of what was really going on in their heart. Being angry really was just how they knew how to express their fear. Being detached may be how they expressed frustration or loneliness. So understanding that the things that motivate people to act the way they act almost always are not surface level.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, the thing that I have learned and try to practice more than ever is that very issue, is that what you first see and hear out of a person is a response to something that is usually deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Sonia and I often say it this way: everybody has a story.
Yes.
And until you know their story, you can't necessarily understand their response and their reaction. But once you do, oftentimes then you go, oh, that makes sense. Now I know why that's such a sensitive issue when it comes up. And so to understand that people have a story, they have a reason why they are at the place they are and why they're responding as a leader, I think is extremely important. So the more you get to know and understand a person, and that's done through relationship, the more pieces start to go in place. John Maxwell's book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, I think that's another way to do this, where you get beyond the surface response of people. And just by observation, I'm going to say you do that much better than I do, where you just tend to probe and ask questions that open up people so that you start to get more and more insights. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to know all that. but to the question, I think that is a great thing to practice as a leader to help understand people more.
When I reread the question, not the question, but the verse, one of the things that I was just thinking about is years ago, an old man, well, he's really old now, but I thought he was old then, but he wasn't as old as I thought. Yeah. I was a young man at the time. But yeah, I would guess he's probably close to 90 now. And he was in the music business. His family's fairly famous in the Christian music business. But he told me, he said, you can learn something from everybody. You can learn either how to do it or how not to do it. But one of the ways that you learn, so there are people who I believe have genuine wisdom, but they're not just going to dole it out.
Yeah.
They want to know that you've got to draw it out. And if they see a genuine interest, they will give you all of the information you want. And, I've said this a lot recently. I wish I had been more intentional about that when I was younger. I had a lot of mentors, but most of them were at a distance, cassettes, books, reading. I've been fortunate in the last few years to be able to put myself in some places where I could up close. And what I found is if a person genuinely, so I text somebody the other day and I said, I'm trying to figure something out. Will you answer this question? And I laid the question. All I wanted was a text. They said, would you like to get on a call? I said, well, I'm not going to turn this chance down. Sure. So if they know you want it, you can get it out. Because when I reread it, it says, the good advice is hidden in the heart. A person of understanding is going to find a way to draw that out of them to get the wise advice. Sometimes you said I have a way of drawing that out of people. Sometimes I don't think I'm good at it, but there are other times I sit and listen to people. There are some people who I think are tremendous at it. And then there are other people who I hear ask questions and I go, that don't sound very genuine, right? You're fishing for something. And I will tell you that I will often, if I feel like somebody's trying to manipulate what I'm getting ready to say to them, they're not going to get the best answer out of me. I'm going to guard, what I say to you, because if I drop this on you, you're going to take it and weaponize it or do something stupid with it. And so I find myself drawing back, and I could think of some examples where that would be the case. But I think when you're around people, if you're a learner, you've got to ask the right questions, and you got to do it with a genuine heart.
Mm-hmm.
People know, right? You know, if I'm asking a church about, you know, if I'm asking a question, if I'm around somebody who's pastoring a church of 20, 50, 70,000 people, and I say, you know, tell me what that's like, they're going to look at me and go, no, that's an irrelevant question for you. Mm-hmm. It really is. You know, they're not going to tell me but so much because it is an irrelevant question. But if I say, you know, when your church was at 1,000, what were 3 things that you did that were game changers? Yeah. You know, then they're like, okay, you really want to know something. And I think that is important for us to do as we're asking questions. They need to be genuine. So he talks about in verse 6, while many claim to be loyal, a truly faithful person is hard to find. Why is public self-promotion so common today, and how do we evaluate actual faithfulness over loud loyalty?
We live in a culture that rewards visibility. You receive accolades for how visible you are, how influential your platform is. But truth be told, faithfulness is not a spectator sport. It is not a place where you should expect visibility or applause. I can say anything I want to say about myself to, you know, to boost, like this is how much I've done. But the true reward comes from the small things done when nobody's watching that produce fruit later. Mm-hmm. It's the evidence of that faithfulness that matters.
Yeah, simply actions speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. Words are sometimes easy and cheap, but loyalty and faithfulness is proven out over time.
Yes.
You know, to me, it boils down to that.
I'm weary of loud loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
If you got to tell me how loyal you are,
yeah,
I feel like you're trying to. I feel like I'm watching a magic show, and they're doing something with this hand, so I don't see what they're doing with this hand. That's how I feel.
I'll pull this rabbit.
Look over here. Watch over here.
Yeah. That's how I feel. Mm-hmm. You know, because there are now that's not always the case.
Right.
Some people are just loud, but there are some people who are loud loyalists, you know, and they want everybody to know that they are in your corner until they're not.
Well, and I think that's usually the case when things are up and to the right and going extremely well. Yeah. They want to jump the bandwagon and to try to identify themselves as loyal, whether it's to an individual organization, but you let things go the other way and you find out instantly how loyal they are.
Time is really the only revealer of loyalty. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. But it's just time, you know, because if enough time is given, you're going to have the good seasons and the bad seasons.
Yes. Right.
You know, if it's short, you know, no, I can't even use that example. But some people will tell you they're going to give you a certain amount of time and then they don't, right? Because it just don't look like what they thought. And loud loyalty is just no. I mean, I'm not impressed by loud loyalty. Don't tell me.
Well, the reality is you don't even have to declare or to say it because either you are or you're not.
Right.
Yeah, you just
prove it out.
I mean, jokingly, I mean, I was serious in the answer, but just today, you were there. I said, if you ask me that question, my answer would be, do your job and shut up. That would be my response. I don't need you to tell me what you're going to do for me. Yeah. I don't even need you to know. You're here.
Just do
it. And
if
you're doing your job, you're going to help me get where I want to go. And I don't need your loyalty verbalized. I need your actions, your loyalty demonstrated. Yeah. That's right. So thank you for joining us again today on One Single Story. I would tell you, when you stop trying to market your own name and start executing the hidden seasonal obedience, you'll step out of the crowd of talkers into a rare company of faithful people. I hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.